culture change is slow, and it's an accumulation of small things that we consistently do to change how we operate as an institution. And having a shiny new project is not going to achieve that realistically in 2 years as well.
Hello, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship podcast series by UIN. I am Valzhano Razbaeva, Director of Research and Training at UIN, and I'm your host for today. In this episode, I spoke with Kirsty Collinge, head of the research strategy team within the Edinburgh Research Office at the University of Edinburgh, about what it takes to build a genuine innovation career pathway for researchers. We unpacked why universities need to move beyond rhetorical support, how career structures can better reflect innovation-focused work, and what it means to create institutional conditions for culture change to happen in practice. This episode offers a practical look at how to make innovation a more visible and legitimate part of the academic career. Today, we'll explore a question that many universities, I can imagine, are grappling with. How do we move beyond encouraging innovation rhetorically and actually create academic career structures that recognizes it and rewards it? So we are delighted to be joined by Kirsty Collinge, head of the research strategy team within Edinburgh Research Office at the University of Edinburgh. Kirsty has been closely involved in shaping Edinburgh's innovation career pathway and broader work around research and innovation strategy. What I am particularly looking forward to exploring today is not only what Edinburgh has built, but also how institutional culture changes in practice, especially when universities are trying to connect research excellence, commercialization, external engagement, and societal impact in a more meaningful way. There are so many aspects to it. So thank you so much, Kirsty, for joining us today, and I look forward to a conversation with you.
You're very welcome. So that was a fantastic introduction. I don't think I need to say much more than that. So I am the head of research strategy in the Edinburgh Research Office here at the University of Edinburgh. And my team leads a diverse portfolio of projects. So we cover things like research culture projects, talent development, funding portfolio diversification, funder engagement, and a whole lot more. But we also are leading on the new University Innovation Career Pathway. And that's what I hope to be telling you all a lot more about today.
They're quite excited, Kirsty. So let's just start.
Let's do it.
Exactly. And maybe actually to start us off, many universities actually talk about innovation and entrepreneurship, external engagement strategically, but the academic career system often still reward more traditional pathways. Yeah. So what problem was Edinburgh trying to solve through this new innovation career pathway that you mentioned in your introduction?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. And I think there is no one problem it's trying to solve. I would say this is sort of multi-dimensional. In fact, there's lots of challenges, but also lots of opportunities in doing this. So I'll start with what I'd say is the more boring stuff. So at the university level, what is the driver for doing this? And then we'll turn our attention to why it benefits researchers. So I think thinking from a research and innovation strategy perspective, we're all facing increasing financial pressures. And that's not just in the UK. I think we can say that's worldwide. And so on a practical level, this is about income growth and income diversification, especially in the UK where we have to cross-subsidise our research funding portfolio. So from that level, we want to increase commercialisation, translational income, and this is one of the ways of doing that. We also have the research assessment exercise in the UK, and many countries also have national equivalents. And impact is 25% of our overall score. Now, at the moment, our success in that exercise drives around £70 million in funding to the Research of Edinburgh every single year. So for us, it's also contributing to developing that robust pipeline of impact case studies from a strategy perspective. And of course, reputation. So we want enhanced visibility to be a destination that innovative researchers want to come to from that strategic talent pipeline development point of view. But moving on to researchers, the real stars of the show, putting aside the strategy stuff, like you said earlier, it's about recognition and reward. And there's a perception still that the university doesn't really reward or recognise innovation. And it's an extra. It's always seen in extra terms. It's something to do in an add-on to what you're already doing as an academic. And here at the university as well, we had innovation in promotion criteria, but it wasn't explicitly surfaced. And I think people were reticent to go down the innovation career pathway because of that uncertainty as to whether do I not give up research, but do I sway in one direction to the other. So there's a hearts and minds exercise here in terms of we need to raise a visibility and signal that the university is backing a different career pathway for those that want to choose it. And then that comes on to the sort of the last opportunity. It's about diversifying academic careers. I think we've moved along from the model 30 years ago where you do a PhD, a postdoc, and then you're a lecturer, and then upwards for life. There are many more different pathways that academics can now pursue, but we really need to articulate what that looks like. So I think there's many factors. There's strategic factors, there's diversifying academic careers, there's personal satisfaction for those who want to pursue an innovation career path. So in a way, it's a great project because we get to have lots of benefits and solve lots of problems by doing it.
Wonderful. And I certainly hear indeed that that is an expectation perhaps that comes from the universities themselves, but also something that some of the researchers would really want to do. Yeah. And I really think that distinction is really important. So what you said about the difference between perhaps just celebrating innovation occasionally versus structurally recognizing it as a legitimate academic work as well. And maybe we can stay on that a little bit because, just naturally moving on to this new question, I was wondering, so many institutions support innovators, I would say, individually. We can see it across the board. Yeah. But far fewer actually create an actual pathway around it, which is why I think your case is so exceptional. So for those who may not be familiar with the model, could you walk us through what the innovation career pathway actually looks like in practice? Perhaps you can talk about the main components. How does it support academics differently from more traditional structures?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things to make clear about the innovation career pathway, this is not just about promotions. And I think a lot of people think a career pathway is all about being promoted. But here we're really taking a multidimensional approach. I love the word multidimensional, but it's very much the case for innovation. And so our initiative is very much along 3 strands of activity. So the first being around recruitment. So we basically want to attract the best talent we can do, and we want hiring managers to consider maybe hiring people with a more innovation-heavy profile. But that's not something we're traditionally used to doing at a research-intensive university. So we've developed a range of practical materials to support people to actually hire innovation-active staff. And so the first one is something called a job description matrix. And so this includes practical examples of innovation activity at each of the different grade levels, and it illustrates how you can embed it into a job advert or a job description. So very, very practical tips. But if people haven't seen it before, they are often at odds as to what to put in these types of materials. So really spelling it out in simple terms. We've also got a job description repository, which is very similar, but this actually has examples of job descriptions. So right the way through from postdoctoral researchers who are wholly focusing on innovation, right the way through to lecturers who maybe do research and innovation, and all the way through to senior innovation leaders and senior professors as well. So it really gives you the full range of different types of academic roles that might include innovation in them and what they look like. And we also have put together some top tips for how to write a compelling job advert. So this is the one thing that came back really clearly when we were out consulting about the innovation career path is universities on the whole do not write very engaging job adverts. They're usually pretty rubbish, even for people who want to do a traditional academic role, never mind someone who's interested in innovation. They're not captivating, they're not capturing people's attention whatsoever. So we have a series of top tips basically as to how to get people's attention, whether it's someone who's already in an academic career, who maybe wants to come to the University of Edinburgh, or people currently working in industry and they want to come back into academia and pursue an academic industry type hybrid role. So that's the recruitment strand of our pathway. The second one is about recognition and reward. So what we want to do is recognise and reward people who are doing innovation properly. And so they get promoted because of innovation, not just on the chance that somebody recognised it and thought it was useful. So we were very lucky in the fact about 18 months ago, the university was doing a root and branch review of all academic promotions. So it was a perfect opportunity to think about how do we look at innovation in that process. So what we've done is we've developed a new academic promotion profile. It's called External Engagement, Innovation and Impact. So traditionally, as part of promotions criteria, you would have a dimension along learning and teaching. You would have one for research. You might have one for civic or mission or leadership. This is an additional one to those types of dimensions in the academic profiles. And so we've explicitly built in innovation into promotion criteria. We're not the only university to have done this, but again, it's part of this comprehensive approach that we're calling the pathway. It's not just about promotions. Of course, that is very important. And the third dimension is learning and development. And so what we've done here is we developed a sector first. I keep calling it a sector first because I've yet to see anyone else that's done one. So I'm going to keep claiming it until somebody else puts me right. But it's a competency framework for innovation careers. And so we have 5 different innovator levels. We have 10 different competencies, and it sets out the skills, knowledge, and behaviours that researchers need to basically pursue an innovation-based career pathway. We also use that framework to undertake a university-wide mapping of the learning and development opportunities we have. So we have a fabulous commercialisation service, Edinburgh Innovations, and they provide lots of programmes, training, events. But what we discovered is that there's actually quite a lot of other things across the university which speaks to innovation in pockets. So we were able to bring all this together into a comprehensive offering. So that's available through a web-based SharePoint site where people can plan their own learning and development. And we've also developed a really snazzy brochure, the same we have with the competency framework as well. So please do come onto our website. These are the training and opportunities aren't available to the sector, but the competency framework is absolutely available to the sector if you're interested in having a look at that. But yeah, 3 strands: recruiting people, promoting them, and developing them.
I'm definitely checking out the website to just see how the framework looks like, because indeed that is quite unique, I think. And one thing that I'm certainly hearing from you is that this isn't just about innovation support in isolation. It's really about creating this 360 degrees almost support that includes visibility, legitimacy, progression around innovation related work, which is wonderful. But creating structures could be the beginning of that journey. Now, changing the culture inside the university is another elephant in the room that should be addressed, especially when different parts of the institution may define that academic value or impact differently. So I guess my next question to Kirsty is, what were some of those perhaps most biggest or interesting cultural or institutional barriers that you've encountered when trying to embed this wonderful support system that you have created with this more also entrepreneurial and more well-rounded approach within the university?
So I would say cultural barriers are interesting, right? And I think a lot of ours probably stem from misconceptions rather than genuine barriers. It's a not knowing and then mistruth spread. So I think one of them, thinking about the promotions piece of work, one of the questions I was often asked is, does that mean I have to now do evidence? Do I now have to evidence innovation on top of everything else? And that's absolutely not the case. This is there for people that do want to pursue innovation as part of their academic journey, but it is absolutely not a requirement for all our researchers now to start doing innovation. So I think that was one of the main misconceptions. And that's just a lack of knowledge as to what this thing is because it's new and it's being introduced. I think there's a lot of skepticism around, we've got innovation in promotion criteria, but do we have the correct infrastructure in place to actually allow it to happen? Because what can happen is you've introduced new criteria, but then nothing around it changes. So what's happening with the actual paperwork? So at the moment, our paperwork is very, what's the grant income, what are the publications? And so obviously the next phase before that we start to promote with innovation is to think, what does the paperwork need to look like now to accommodate this new criteria? The same for the panels. We can't just have the same panels without any experts who can speak to academic innovation. So making sure the panel compositions are right. So that's, again, it's a hearts and minds exercise. We've done the first thing, which is committing to change the criteria, but we've now got to show we're putting the supporting infrastructure around those changes to actually make sure they happen. And I think as well, that speaks to, in terms of a cultural barrier, a suspicion that the university still values traditional academic metrics. And I don't think this innovation career pathway, any institution can really crack that. I think this is a much longer cultural objective, which is what this innovation career path is working towards, where innovation is normalized as part of an academic career. And that's you're probably looking 10, 20 years down the line for that to happen, because culture change is slow. And it's an accumulation of small things that we consistently do to change how we operate as an institution. And having a shiny new project is not going to achieve that realistically in 2 years as well. And I think on a more practical level as well, I think there are concerns for those who are innovation active over mobility. So we are obviously going very heavy in terms of rewarding academic careers. We want to promote them to enable them, but every university is at a different maturity point. So, for example, if academic staff who are innovation active come here and then they want to progress their career at a different institution, how does that mobility work? So that's coming up against issues around IP retention. So if you're generating IP at this university and then you want to go and pursue your innovation somewhere else, how do you then take that innovation with you when it's retained by the existing university? So that's a very practical example, but I think there are high level sort of cultural barriers and miscommunications, and then there's the very practical elements when you actually start to implement these things of how does it actually work. And that's where we can think to about how we refine it when these things come up as well. So I think that's for me some of the main barriers. But yeah, nothing we can't overcome, I'm sure.
The UIIN Conference 2026, where universities, industry, and innovators meet to shape the future. Join us in Stockholm for 3 days of insight, inspiration, and impact. Hear from global thought leaders, expand your network, and be part of the conversations driving collaboration forward. Secure your place now at uiin.org/conference.
I love the spirit, but just maybe a quick follow-up on this though, because one thing that I would be very keen to hear is whether you find any differences across disciplines, for example, when you work across different faculties, to find that perhaps researchers from one faculty versus another will engage differently with that type of support, and also how did perhaps the leadership at your university help create legitimacy for this kind of work as well?
So that's very interesting. So speaking to the leadership angle first, I can maybe then go on to how the different disciplines work. So one of the things we were really keen on is making sure we were highly consultative in developing this. So it's an 18 to 20 month project, overnight success project, but that's very deliberate in terms of trying to engage at all different levels of the university. But when it comes to leadership, obviously in our institutional strategy, our research and innovation strategy, we've committed to, we will develop a new innovation career pathways. Like, it's in there. And I think that's really important because it sends a signal from the highest level of the institution that we value entrepreneurial activity and we will support academics to pursue this different career pathway. And I think in making such a bold commitment in a very visible and high profile strategy, I think it keeps the leadership accountable to the staff. So if we'd have committed to doing this and then, as is the case in some strategies, nothing ever happens, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, what do you say? Oh, we're not doing it. That'd be very embarrassing. So I think the leadership being bold and actually putting it front and centre into our research and innovation strategy made a clear signal to academics that we were serious in doing this. And there's the backing at the highest level of the university. Thinking of the leadership at the next organisational level down, so heads of school. So we have lots of heads of school at Edinburgh because it's absolutely huge. So we have around 24 heads of school. And what I would do with the Vice Principal for Research and Innovation each year is we would have an annual strategy meeting where we discuss various aspects of strategy and how the school's direction. And then the particular year we were developing this project, we decided to take with us a draft version of the competency framework for research careers and an outline project plan for what the innovation career path would look like. So we thought we're going to get immediate feedback in certain areas of like, this works for us, or what are you doing this for? This does not apply to us whatsoever. And I think one of the pleasant surprises from that exercise across all the disciplines is that there was no pushback. Everybody could see the value of doing this and people were on board. And I think in some of the arts and humanities areas, we thought, oh, they're saying that it's great, but realistically, they're not going to use it. And I think the value to them is it provides us with a consistent language to talk about innovation in the university. So some areas, for example, STEM heavy areas, they speak the innovation language, where other areas don't. But in having the terminology defined, in talking about how we support innovation across the entire institution and not in certain disciplines, that helps people to talk to one another, and also people who aren't as involved in innovation to talk to people who they might be managing who are interested in innovation. So I think that's one thing to come out of it. And I think as well, in presenting it in such what I'm hoping is a very simple way that people could understand, it actually makes people recognise a lot of people are actually doing innovation, but in ways they didn't think they were doing it. So we had one meeting, so we have a fantastic divinity school, and you might be thinking, people in divinity, they're not interested in the innovation career path. That's for medicine and engineering, right? But they were really enthusiastic about it. But realistically speaking, they're saying most of our staff are not going to pursue this career pathway. But we're so glad it exists, because for those that might want to dabble in innovation or pursue that, there's something there from them that we can't provide as an individual school. So I think part of this as well is about equity across the entire institution, that irrespective of where you're coming from, however you've supported innovation locally, there's something for you to tap into if you want to pursue that career path. So absolutely there are different disciplinary differences, but what we're hoping to do is make this pathway equitable, irrespective of challenges that are local to disciplines and areas, and to provide that common language that we can all speak around innovation.
The inclusivity aspect of it is indeed key. And I really like what you said about being able to speak the language of those who you are actually trying to appeal to. We at UN, we call it, it's almost like being a chameleon, just trying to just adjust the way you would like to approach some of those topics depending on the audience that you're addressing. So it's very interesting to hear how you also try to include that into your, again, very well-rounded approach. But I think some of the challenges that you have described, perhaps many of those who are listening today could certainly relate to as well, which then brings me perhaps to the next question that I wanted to address with you, Kirsty. Let's imagine that another university would like to start moving in this direction. So what practical mechanisms actually matter most? So what would you recommend that they should start with? Because you have done such a good job in building it from ground up, involving so many different stakeholders. So what helped turn this from, I'd say, an idea into something tangible that was implemented already and still grows and still evolves into something that really works for the university?
That's a good point. So I think the first thing we did when we started to do this is we've got the idea. Now, what do we do about it? So we need to bring together the people, the senior people with the resources in their area that need to make this happen. So we set up an innovation career path steering group. So that was co-chaired with the Vice Principal for Research and Innovation and co-chaired by our Vice Principal for Corporate Services. And then we have senior representatives from the HR, Personnel Department, from our Research Office, and also from our Commercialisation Service. So it wasn't a particularly large group. I would say it's about 6 people, including myself. And I think at the very beginning, that's key to actually working out what will happen. I think we want to be very inclusive and democratic, but in terms of actually thinking through that initial idea, by having that group too broad, you can have what I call death by democracy. Everyone's got an opinion, but you can't reach a consensus. So starting out small with the right people at the right table to really have a think through what works for the institutional environment. So if people went and copied our approach, it might not work in different environments. They might need to tweak it, and thinking out what you can do in the current operating environment as well. So there's all these considerations, and that's why it's really important to have these budget holders and people responsible for different resource areas to think through those issues before you actually start to design what it will look like. So over a period of about 3 to 4 months, we put together a high-level project plan. So that was very much the beginning of this. And I think that also signifies high-level buying as well. So I think these things can sometimes be quite democratic and bottom-up, which is great as well because there's clearly a need and a momentum behind them. But if there's not a clear signal, it's got institutional backing, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think having the right people there from the outset at the beginning makes these things live. But in terms of something more practical, in terms of my top tips, so obviously it's not just about having a steering group, doing a project plan and then hoping for the best. The first one is time. So absolutely, if however much time you think you need, double it. And that's not a bad thing because we're trying to create culture change, and culture change is not a month job. We're not trying to be slow either with rolling things out, but it needs to be done right. We need to consult the right people. We need to engage people. And time is absolutely critical in that. You can't rush things. It needs to actually be solid and well thought out and engaging the right people at the right time. And so again, engagement is critical for buy-in. So senior leadership need to buy into it. The sort of the middle leadership, the heads of school need to buy into it because they are the people that most academics will experience in terms of leadership day in, day out. And I think as well, sustained and targeted communication. So what can normally happen with these kind of major university-wide projects is you have a big splash when something's launched. You might have another communication and then it falls off a cliff edge, nothing ever happens. And so we deliberately had a 6-month, it's called Unlocking Innovation campaign, of which the Innovation Career Path was part of, but we're also continuing the communication as well. So embedding it locally where people are actually going to read about it. So not letting up at any point. So we need to basically get it so it's business as usual and people are used to seeing what the innovation career pathway is. So we'll only stop when people keep saying, do you know what it is? And if someone says no, we need to keep going because not everybody knows about it. Even if not necessarily everyone has to then buy into it, it's a case of we need people to actually know about it, that it exists. And I think my final top tip, and so which may or may not go down well with some innovation colleagues here, so please close your ears and don't judge me, is don't leave it to the commercialisation office. So I think we have a fantastic commercialisation service at Edinburgh without a shadow of a doubt. But when we're trying to get people to pursue an innovation career pathway, we're really targeting researchers. And I think sometimes innovation officers often speak the language of innovation a little bit too well. And so they're used to engaging with people who are already innovation active. They understand all the different facets of what innovation looks like. But what we want to do is capture the people with innovative ideas who have yet to do anything about it, who probably don't even recognise what innovation is and the fact they might have an innovative idea. And a lot of that corporate commercial innovation language can be very off-putting and exclusionary. So what I brought to it is very much I'm reading it as a researcher. So if I can't understand it, neither can they. So I'm not saying it should be done in the research office. It absolutely should be done in partnership with different services. It can't just be left to the innovation office, especially given that it's a university-wide career path.
I was about to say, I think what you're doing so beautifully at your university is that you managed to bring all those very important actors together, commercialization team included, but you, just like you were talking about it before, you were really able to bring together this group of internal champions that really can move things around and actually create that movement as well. So I'm pretty sure everyone listening to us were taking notes as you were giving away your wonderful tips. Thank you so much for that. And just being mindful of time, maybe one thing that I wanted to ask you just to finish off this conversation is when you look back on the journey so far, what do you think perhaps other universities more generally in the UK or maybe in Europe most often perhaps underestimate when trying to build a stronger innovation culture? So what do you think is something that they perhaps do not take into account or underestimate?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So I've worked at a few institutions. So I'm just thinking, I don't think there is one thing universities would underestimate. I think having worked in multiple different institutions, some very innovation focused institutions and some very broad-based institutions, it's not one thing. I think I would say look internally and what one thing in your university would be your Achilles heel or weakness when it comes to trying to embed an innovation culture. So that's not a very great, I'm sure you were looking for a silver bullet response there. However, I'd say all universities are different. We've got technical universities, we've got small specialists, we've got very broad, ancient universities, we've got modern universities. And what innovation looks like will differ in each one in terms of what the uniqueness and what the specialties are. So I would encourage people to look internally and maybe make some comparisons with some other universities in terms of what does their innovation culture look like? Should that be something we're aspiring to, or what would fit for us?
I think it's a great answer, and context matters. I absolutely agree with you. So indeed, trying to understand what are you good at and what can you bring to the table, especially in supporting researchers that are already very innovative just by their nature of the work that they're doing. So the support that you're providing to them is truly exceptional. So we'll be certainly keeping an eye on the work that you're doing. And thanks so much for sharing all those wonderful tips with all of us. So Kirsty, was a pleasure. And I hope to stay in touch. And thanks everyone for joining in today as well. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIN on LinkedIn, and if you're enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.